I decided that I was going to try to decode the secrets of New Yorker hyphenation. So I just went through dozens and dozens of issues, and I just copied virtually every phrase that had a hyphen in it, and then I tried to puzzle out or suss out the patterns. And I included part of that in that grammar book that I co-wrote that you mentioned earlier. In conclusion, just to wrap up that comment, I don't think that people in general love punctuation enough. I think a lot of people, especially emerging from maybe public schools where where students were taught that punctuation is based on pauses, and all you have to do is, when there's a crevice in the sentence where you would pause if you read out loud, insert a comma. Well, that system of punctuation went out of style in the late 19th century. Here we are in the 21st century. I think that, unfortunately, too many people think of punctuation as nothing more than some kind of ornamentation or embellishment or decoration, or that you simply throw into a sentence to appease an English teacher, to placate, some fusspot somewhere or whatever. But punctuation often participates directly in the meaning of a sentence. So I admire punctuators. I admire writers who are obsessed with punctuation. Gordon Lish, a very prominent editor, who's no longer, he's retired, but he once quit a job over a comma. Now imagine that. And E.M. Charin, a Romanian writer who wrote in French, once wrote, "I dream of a world in which one might die for a comma." My own obsession with punctuation doesn't quite take it to that extreme. I just love punctuation. Well, I love everything about language. Yeah.
How do you feel about pre-punctuation literature, like medieval texts, before? Do they have some fundamental missing?
I have no problem. I have no problem with that whatsoever. And I enjoy, especially looking at 18th century punctuation, where the punctuation really was based on pauses. In terms almost like rhythmic methods. If you had a pause of one beat, it would be a comma. If it was 2 beats, it was a semicolon. If it was 3 beats, it was a colon. And obviously, those of you who are literature majors and you're reading 18th century novels whose punctuation hasn't been modernized, you'll see commas in places where you would no longer see them today. So it's kind of curious to look at that, because punctuation was, at that time, really was based upon the spoken language and pauses. Yeah.
I was wondering what kind of environment you prefer while writing, and specifically what kind of music, if any, you like to listen to while writing.
I haven't listened to music while writing in a very long time, because I find that my concentration is too easily distracted by any kind of auditory stimulus. So I wear earplugs, and over the earplugs I wear headphones that are plugged into a white noise CD. So I try to block everything out. I know that a lot of writers do listen to music while they're writing, and there's even a website, I think it's called Large-Hearted Boy, where writers are asked to essentially explain what music they were listening to when they wrote a particular book. Now, I do listen to a lot of music, but I don't listen while I am writing. I listen to a lot of music repetitively, and also watch movies repetitively. I have to confess that I've seen the movie Wendy and Lucy over 100 times since it came out on DVD in May. Have any of you seen that movie, Wendy and Lucy? Any other question? Yeah.
The title of the book, Stories in the Worst Way. What does "in the worst way" mean to you?
Well, in one sense, it's an idiomatic phrase. I want to do something in the worst way, meaning I really, really want to do it. But in the way in which I was using it, I was playing on that. It's as if the narrators of these stories had no choice but to divulge their confessions, etc. But also, it was a self-mocking title. So I gave my critics and reviewers opportunity to dismiss the book. I think one reviewer said the title was Truth in Advertising. So these are indeed awful, awful stories. So I was playing around with the ambiguity of the phrase. Yeah.
What do you plan on writing next?
I'm working on some more short stories, and there's one short story that I'm hoping to expand into a short novella, which would be the longest thing I will have ever written in terms of fiction. Yeah.
What is your view of the relationship between the writer and the public?
My view is not the standard view, because I really don't have much of an audience in mind when I'm writing, and I'm primarily writing to, I don't want to say it's some form of therapy, but I'm essentially my own audience. I want to write something that I want to read. So I know that the kind of writing that I do, and also the writing that a lot of the writers that I admire do, is not going to reach a wide audience because it frustrates their expectations of what you expect from a short story, such as character development, characters with names, a clear sense of where a story is taking place, whether it's taking place in Pittsburgh or Trenton. And I never do that. I regret that in my first book I mentioned McDonald's once, and in my second book I mentioned Coca-Cola once, and I regret that because it sounds like product placement, or it sounds like a concession to this consumer-oriented, brand-infatuated society in which we live. I guess I mentioned Coca-Cola simply because that was what I was drinking at the time. And McDonald's was where I was eating almost every day until I shifted my allegiance to Burger King, where I've eaten almost every day for the past 15 years, to the detriment of my health. But cholesterol is something very close to my heart.
One more question?
Yeah.
What's your some of the authors you admire?
Some of the authors I admire. Right now, among contemporary writers, Christine Scott is a writer that I absolutely worship. And if you haven't read her, I really recommend that you read her second collection of short stories, which is called A Day, a Night, Another Day, Summer. She's another language-oriented, sentence-oriented writer, and she might as well be classified as a poet because her sentences could be rearranged on the page in stanza form in terms of verse, paragraphs, etc. So right now, she's the writer I most admire, and the writer I would most urge upon anybody who's really interested in where fiction, where literary fiction is headed. And the last name is pronounced, it's spelled S-C-H-U-T-T. Well, thank you very much, and thanks for those great